Hello, everyone. I'm Sergey Lagodinsky. I'm a member of the European Parliament. Herzlich willkommen. Ich mache das zu Beginn noch kurz auf Deutsch. Das ist ein Webinar, was wir auf Englisch machen. Und deswegen werde ich jetzt zum Englischen switchen. I am looking forward to seeing you. I'm trying just to close something that I don't want to see here on the screen. As you know, it's not so easy. So welcome everyone. I'm Sergey. I'm a member of European Parliament from the Green Party, and we have a number of webinars, so seminars online, where we use this time, that the time of social distancing, the time of staying at home, to continue working. And we're trying to focus on topics that maybe are, as we say, a little bit in the shadow of the coronavirus. Everything is in the shadow of the coronavirus here, but you know, the world goes on, and the problems of the world also continue. And we wanted to continue talking about these problems, not to forget them. Before we talk about the topic today, a little bit of the technical reminders and technical remarks. Most of the participants who will be here are muted. So we turned off your microphones, and we will start with talking with our guest, whom I will introduce in a moment. But if you want to ask a question later, then you should raise your hand if you have a question, and you will be also added to the list. We can also take written questions, and I don't see this on the notes that I have, but there is usually a mode where written questions are possible as well. If you don't have a microphone, or if you want to put a question, there is an option in the program to write a question. So, and as soon as you are done with your question, please mute yourself so that we can go back to our discussion. I would like to introduce the topic first, and the topic is what's going on in Russia. Today, President Putin had an 8-minute statement on TV where he talked about the coronavirus, and in this 8-minute statement, the only thing that he said is that nobody has to work in Russia until the end of April, number one. And number two, what is he going to do about the virus? Nothing. He said the regions and the mayors and the governors of the regions will have to do this task, and he will give them additional powers in order to combat the virus. So this is a very bizarre situation where people like our guest, whom I will introduce in a second, are a little bit puzzled what is going on. But this is part of a larger puzzle of the situation in Russia, of the situation that's actually started many years ago, but which culminated with this proposal of changing Russian constitution, which in the mid-January, President Putin, out of the blue, came with, and then he made proposals, and these proposals were adopted by Duma, were created by a very strangely composed group of people who were even not qualified lawyers, all of them. And actually, it was supposed to be then voted during the people's referendum, or whatever you want to call it. We will talk about the procedure as well. But now it's been a little bit postponed, but these changes are actually almost enacted. And we would like to talk about those changes in the constitution, the situation in Russia generally, and also maybe something about the situation regarding the COVID legislation in Russia with our great guest, Elena Lukyanova, whom I introduce now. He's one of the leading voices on public law and constitutional law, someone who I deeply admire because she's not just an independent thinker, she's a brilliant thinker. And this combination is something which is really important and rare and Elena Lukyanova teaches at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow. She's author of multiple articles and texts. She was also active politically, at least she was a member of various parties, and now she's joining us today from her home residence, wherever it is, in somewhere in Europe, as far as I understand. You can explain it to us if you want to, but welcome, Elena. It's great to see you, and it's great to see that we're all healthy and all joining here.
Thank you.
Elena, hello.
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 So, first of all, I want to apologize for my English. This is why, because there are too many legal events in Russia, which I have to speak about and to comment in Russian. And that is why I have very poor English speaking practice. And I live in Latvia, where they speak Latvian and Russian also. And I really have no place to speak English. And last 4 months, I haven't spoken English at all. So forgive me advance. I hope Sergey will be my private interpreter in the case when it will be difficult for me to understand and or to.
It's not going to be very private, but Elena, you sound great. I told you at the beginning, we're looking forward, and your language is perfect.
And I'm very sorry, but I will read because I'm not sure myself. So my name is Elena Lukyanova, Sergey told. I'm a professor of the High School of Economics in Moscow. Before that, I worked 32 years in the Constitutional Law Department at Moscow State University. I'm already head of agency for monitoring law enforcement effectiveness in Russia. Also, I'm hereditary lawyer, the daughter of the last chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, the person who was recognized in 1990 as the best parliament speaker in Europe. My father died years ago, and his wooden gavel of the best European Parliament speaker given him by Margaret Thatcher is kept at my home. So what I say about Russian constitutional amendments. Nowadays, many people are thinking more about the limits of human rights restrictions in the conditions of quarantine and about any constitutional changes in foreign countries. We are also thinking about what our life will be like after the pandemic. During the pandemic, we can see nearly similar behavior either of democratic or authoritarian regimes, and we do not know if states would like to keep those large powers which they have received in emergency situation or not. From this point of view, the constitutional processes taking place in Russia have indeed been overshadowed by the COVID-19. But the epidemic will end and the processes will remain. So the Russian constitution adopted in 1993 has two parts with different legal force. First part is chapters 1, 2, and 9, which can be only changed by the Constitutional Assembly or by referendum. Another part is the rest 6 chapters, which can be changed in a special complicated procedure. But a priori, and in any case, these chapters cannot contradict the 3 unchangeable ones. During 26 years since its adoption, and especially during last 20 years, the Russian constitution has been repeatedly violated by the state, but minor amendments have been made only once. All the time, President Putin said that his plans do not include any constitutional changes, that the constitution is a kind of sacred cow that cannot be touched and must be protected. Even 2 years ago, when we very widely celebrated the quarter century of the Constitution, he publicly promised not to change it. But contrary to his promises, in January 2020, Putin initiated major constitutional reforms framed as amendments to changeable chapters of the Constitution. Initially, the president announced that the amendments to the unchanged chapters will not be made. However, the first set of proposed amendments showed that nearly all the changes contradict to the unchanged ones. First set of amendments, introduced to the Russian Parliament on January 20, has already been assessed by experts as extremely dangerous for the core values of the Russian constitutional system. Contrary to Putin's promise to redistribute powers from the president to the parliament, the president has received many additional competences to the detriment of all other branches of government. These amendments also effectively destroy local self-government, undermine parliamentarism, federalism, and judicial independence. It threatens the procedure of fulfilling Russia's international obligation and significantly restricted citizens' electoral rights and their access to public service. In any case, the mechanisms for protecting human rights and freedoms in Russia have been severely weakened. That is why the amendments were characterized as a constitutional coup. Scientists managed to analyze these amendments. Even a book called Deconstruction of the Constitution was published a month ago. Also were written many different professional conclusions, including the very disturbing opinion of the International Commission of Jurists, about which Sergey told. More than 3,000 signatures of scientists against the amendments were collected. Members of the Parliament Assembly of the Council of Europe have asked the Venice Commission to evaluate the amendments. And all this was very similar to the adoption of the Hungarian Constitution of 2011. The same thing. Despite all these efforts, in the end, 46 amendments were included in the Russian Constitution. In contrast to the first set of the amendments, in the final version, a lot of strange things appeared in it. For example, the mention of God, historical memory, the state forming Russian nationality, and of course, it was there the famous amendment made by 83-year-old Russian spacewoman Valentina Tereshkova about zeroing out presidential terms for Putin. Now we have to say that this is the completely different Russian constitution, and this constitution is very far from democratic standards and values. The proposed changes were eagerly passed through and adopted by both chambers of the national parliament, in which the ruling United Russia Party holds a constitutional majority. Also, in the twinkling of an eye, all the regional parliaments ratified the amendments. The then president referred the bill to the Russian Constitutional Court, which has a duty to review constitutional amendments to ensure they comply with the chapters 1, 2, and 9. Finally, it took only 3 days in the State Duma, 1 day in the Council of Federation, 1 day for regional parliaments, and 3 days of closed regime session, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, in the Russian Constitutional Court. And it again seems to be very similar to the situation with the Hungarian constitution. Russian Constitutional Court hasn't fulfilled its role as the constitutional guardian. It neither saw any violation of procedure nor contradiction with the unchangeable chapters of the Constitution. Without any discussing questions of the law, he appealed to special historical conditions and confirmed the adopted amendments. According to the law, all this procedure is sufficient for making changes to the Constitution. But in order to strengthen the legitimacy of his illegal amendments, Putin said that they should be supported by the citizens. For this purpose was announced the so-called popular vote, with strange rules for holding, quite different to the rules of the elections and referendum. The vote was scheduled for the April 22, but it was postponed indefinitely due to the pandemic. So here's what happened in Russia in the last 3 months. Now we see how the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban directly took advantage of COVID pandemic to obtain dictatorial powers. On the contrary, the pandemic prevented Putin from implementing his constitutional blitzkrieg plans. The process of legitimizing its amendments was stopped due to the pandemic. Therefore, Russians now live in an intermediate constitutional state. From the legal point of view, the new constitution has already been adopted. But by the rules that Putin himself introduced for the amendments, it has not yet entered into force. You can already buy a book with a new constitutional text, but no one knows what law Russia lives by today. Just before Putin announced the amendments to the constitution, I was working with a long article about the problem of identity in Europe and about so-called defensive constitutionalism. My opinion is that the Russian constitutional amendments, together with the Hungarian and Latvian ones, should be studied from the point of view of the artificial constitutional identity in order to achieve certain political goals. So this is the task for the scientists, for the politologs, for the specialist in the constitutional law, international constitutional law, and modern all European constitutional values. Sergey asked me to tell you what I think about the restrictions of human rights in Russia during the pandemic. I must say that Putin feels himself much less confident in the situation with the pandemic, because the virus cannot be edited and improved in an obedient parliament. Therefore, the rights to make decisions how to fight with the virus have been transferred to the government and to the regions. How all this will be implemented in practice is not yet clear. It is not the fact that the strict Chinese version of restrictions in Moscow will be successful. Every day, these rules change depending on the reaction of the citizens, which the government fears. In any case, public confidence to the Russian state is very low now, and we cannot give a reliable forecast of developments. So this is the thing I wanted to say about if we can, I think, discuss the problem. Maybe, I don't know, is it enough or not, but I think that the picture of the amendments is quite clear.
Clear. Well, thank you so much. This is a great statement and a great start. And I wanted to start our exchange, which we will first do between the two of us, and then we will go to the questions of the many people who are online and who are watching us. I wanted to clarify, by the way, to our viewers once again. So you will have the opportunity to ask questions. You use either the raise hand button later, and we will keep a speakers list. And you can also write your questions in written forms. And please also note, this is important, that the webinar is being recorded. Also, the audio of the questions asked will be recorded. So this is just important for the transparency reasons. I wanted to start our discussion with one question. I mean, first of all, you really flattered my European soul, because I finally saw that not our European authoritarians are learning from Mr. Putin, but Mr. Putin is learning from our European authoritarians. It's interesting that you compared this process of changing constitution now in Moscow with the process that has been done, by the way, by a colleague of mine in the Legal Affairs Committee of the European Parliament, Mr. Zaya, and Mr. Orban together during the changes of the Hungarian constitution. So let us start with the process. Is it possible in Russia to change a constitution? And what is wrong with the changes proposed by Putin? What should be the steps usually that you would expect when a constitution, because, you know, in Germany, we also want to change our constitutions. Actually, now there is also a topic about federalism, etc., etc. What was he supposed to do?
So we, in our legislation, we have normal steps of the constitutional changes. First step is the initiative, yes, but you can suggest only one amendment. One amendment separately. You cannot make the whole package of different amendments at once. So this rule, so he suggested 46 different amendments. So, for example, you can suggest 5, but for one question. For example, one amendment for judge, one amendment for the government, one amendment for the president, one amendment for the parliament. Maybe you need to change 1, 2, 3, 10 articles of the constitution with one amendment, but you cannot, all of them must be separate.
Okay. So this is number 1. And then what do you do when you have this one amendment?
And then the amendment must be discussed normally in the parliament. What is normally? 3 readings in the lower chamber, 3 normal readings. So first reading must take not less than 1 month or 2 months, or all the subject of legislative initiative must be informed, and we have a lot of subjects of legislative initiative. We have 89 regions, and all of them must know about it. When regions adopted, so they didn't adopt it. They what did they do? So adopted the amendments. In one region, the chairman of regional parliament in Yakutia, he told that nobody sent them the amendments before, while they were discussing in the State Duma. No one. They sent them only finally after it was it passed through the Duma and the Council of Federation. Nobody saw. Okay. And by the Venus Commission report about the constitutional amendments, we know how important is the procedure, how important is so the speed of the amendments discussing. It's impossible to do it for 3 days. It's abnormal. So it shows that that it is the abnormal parliament in which we didn't see any discussion, any normal discussion.
But that's how things are done. Okay, yeah. One other question on substance. I mean, this is a package of various changes, and you said 46 of them. What is the most stunning? Can you identify 1 or 2 most horrifying, most destructive amendments?
What is the difference, for example, between state power and public power? Can you explain me, as a specialist of constitutional law, public power and state power? So they brought the amendment, suggested the amendment when they said that all the power in the state is the public power, right? But local self-government, is it public power or state power? It is not the state power, yes? But they told it will be the whole system and universal system of public power, and the self-local government will be inside. And we know that local self-government must be independent. It was.
Yeah, this is, you mean this amendment that says that the local power will be built in to the vertical, basically the whole vertical of the power that Putin has proposed.
Only with the playing with the terms, state power and public power. Only some dancing near the words.
But of course, there are proposals and amendments which are, for foreigners are even more striking. So, for example, the amendment that it used to be, I think it's Article 15, if I remember correctly, that that international law supersedes national law in Russia. Yeah, something that, for example, me being watching the situation in Turkey, right? I'm the chair of the EU-Turkey delegation in the European Parliament, and we watch very closely situation of human rights. And it's always very useful for me to refer to the Constitution of Turkey and to say you have to respect the ruling of European Court of Human Rights on Kavala, on Demirtas, etc., all the political prisoners. So before these changes, it was a similar situation in Russia. Now the changes would kill the superior role of international law and will institute national law as more national law. You correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds very unfortunate for me, but at the same time, we know that the Russian government never listened to European Court of Human Rights. They never implemented the rulings of European Court of Human Rights. So, is there going to be any real change if this article or those articles would be changed?
So it sounds very fiercely, but it is not the most interesting amendment, because you're right, nothing changed. Even Constitutional Court told that there is the supremacy of international law in Russian Federation in its decision. Even he told that now international law is with 1/4 of Russian constitution. It's very interesting in the decision of the constitutional law, constitutional court. So they made this, suggested this amendment, as for I understand this one thing amendment, only for some special cases, for example, like case of Yukos, or in the case, for example, yes, which will be maybe in some time for the case of Vladimir Kara-Murza, yes, where he wrote to the European Court about his permission to live abroad, and they refused him to ballot to be the to ballot into Parliament. Yes, for only one cases, and even Constitutional Court told in his decision, we do not deny the supremacy of the international court. We only made the procedure for some cases to not to work with it. So
okay. And it's mostly it's about international arbitration awards, as far as I understand, where it is about economical damages for by UCOS or others. Yeah, this is how I understand is the main purpose of this.
Maybe some cases like this. As for me, I think
okay.
I cannot.
What is the what is the situation with independence of judges? Because the International Committee of Jurists especially emphasized this as an important point. We have a situation where Putin basically is changing, or Duma is changing, how constitutional judges are being appointed and how they can be dismissed.
Yes.
This is also something which is new.
So the main, so the worst amendments, I think, is about the independence of Constitutional Court and about the independence of judgment in Russia. So our Constitutional Court consists of 19 judges. They decided, and a lot of, it's a long line of letters to the Constitutional Court is online, because our Constitutional Court can conclude only one case in one time. So when it has one case, all other people
have to wait.
Have to wait.
So
yes,
it's a waiting list, long waiting list. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Last year we had maybe in line 40,000 cases, and only nearly 50 cases passed through the Constitutional Court last year. But they decided to make so only 11 judges. Only 11 judges.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it will be dependent judges. So now they have 15. 4 places are vacant, but 11 is less than 15 who will be outboard. The best judges who have their own opinions. So I don't know why.
And the judges can be dismissed, right? This is something also something new.
Dismissed by the president, but not by all the judges' society. So it is not Constitutional Court, but any judge now of the Supreme Court, Constitutional Court, can be dismissed by the president.
Okay, I left something for kind of the topping or the icing of the cake. Yeah, I mean, this is, people might say this is boring, it's very technical, etc., etc. But what everyone is really interested in is, of course, our lady cosmonaut, the first woman in space, the inventive and very creative thinker who tailored this saying, we're gonna zeroing down the Putin's tenure, and made this proposal, which basically left everyone totally shocked. And to be honest, I thought maybe this is not something that they've staged, but then very swiftly Putin was on his way to the parliament, and he basically thankfully accepted this proposal that means that he will be in power until 2036. So for 2 more terms at least.
Theoretically, he can use this amendment, but who knows? Would he do it or not? So it was really a very strange amendment. It was against the decision of the Constitutional Court adopted in 1998, when the Constitutional Court told that only 2 terms of presidential terms is the
Is the limit, yeah.
Предел, constitutional limit.
Constitutional limit, yeah.
Constitutional limit. So this amendment was made also with violation. Our so doyen cosmonaut woman, Madame Tereshkova, had no right to suggest this amendment itself, because it was the amendment to the amendments. And in this case, only 1/5 part of Duma could suggest this amendment. And she did only from voice. It was not any written document with this amendment.
Yeah, it was an oral amendment right away. So Elena, what happened there? Do you know? Do you hear anything? Like why suddenly? Because at the beginning, when he brought in the whole constitutional reform, he actually said it's important for him to even delete the word, even to make clear that that the president cannot run for 2 terms at all. Yeah, right. Not what he did with Medvedev, 2 terms, then a pause, and then again 2 terms. So at the beginning, he was talking, and everyone was speculating why he doesn't want to stick to the president's office. He was talking about limiting the president's terms. And then suddenly we flew into the space with Ms. Tereshkova, and on one day you had a totally different situation. Do you hear anything? Like, what happened there? Was it planned from the very beginning, or?
Our president is a very, very closed person. So in order to understand something in his actions, you must be inside his brain. It's impossible, unfortunately. The only thing I heard, the only thing I understand from all the things I heard about this amendment, как будет хромая утка по-английски?
Lame duck. Lame duck.
So he wanted to look like this duck. And this amendment is not for the purpose he will continue to be the main person in Russia. I heard that, but only for this. In order, no one from his friends and from administration can think that they will be the president. So the only version I can understand. But I don't know. No.
I will try to go to some questions because we already have certain people who already started asking questions and putting questions. And I would start with Alexis D, who I assume I know who he is. But we don't pronounce the last names. It's up to you to disclose your identity if you want to. But Alexei D is the first speaker to ask the question. Alexei, welcome. Alexei?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much. Yes, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Great.
Perfectly.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And I actually have two questions, since I come from Latvia and you refer to Hungary as well, and I deal with Hungary in the European Parliament, where I work for the Greens and for Sergey as well. I would like to ask you about the interpretation of the new article in the Constitution. If I remember correctly, it's 67 prim, containing the references to history, to God, and so on. So my experience from Hungary and Latvia was that even like declaratory articles of the Constitution and declaratory references might be later on used by even judicial authorities, such as the Constitutional Court, in order to revise the interpretation, the previous case law and previous interpretation of the Constitution. So I'm wondering to what extent you think those references to history, to God, and so on might be used by the Russian Constitutional Court in future cases also to interpret some notions like the freedom of religion or the freedom of expression. And my second question is purely technical. As far as I know, the Venice Commission is going to discuss the constitutional amendments in June. But I'm wondering to what extent it will resonate in the Russian society at all if the Venice Commission, for example, gives a negative opinion about the constitutional amendments as such, or on the process of adopting those amendments. Thank you very much.
What about?
Thank you. Well, Alexei knows what he's asking about, because he sees how it is when Venice Commission or any other entity says anything about Poland or Hungary and nothing happens. But yeah, please, Elena, I didn't want to interrupt you.
I told about Latvian and Hungarian situation, but the situation are not the same in three countries. It's similar, looks like each other, but not the same. In Latvia is a very specific situation when they artificially changed the preamble of Satversme, Latvian constitution, especially in order to fight with it, to make the special decisions about the Russian language and the national minorities. The thing I called here the certain political goals. It was the artificial constitutional identity. For Latvia is the artificial constitutional identity, especially to decide the special questions. In Hungary, another situation. Nobody knows what did they want when they made such a preamble with so ancient laws with Saint Stephen, with some historical way. I think it was more populist thing, and we do not see concrete decisions of the Constitutional Court with these norms. In Russia, I think that all these strange things appeared in the Constitution really means nothing, means really nothing. It's only the beautiful words, nothing more.
You mean Elena? You mean the word? By that you mean the reference to historical truth?
Because the Constitutional Court told that it do not mean nothing that God is in Constitution, but the situation between church and state will be the same, because Russia has a lot of confessions inside, yes, and the Constitutional Court said it, told it in the decision. Who knows what will be in future? But of course, it is the reason for some maybe blah 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 of the politics in different cases. So if they do not like some process, for example, in European legislation, in the decision of the Venice Commission, in other cases, they can say about our constitution and about memories and about what else they did.
Men and women as a marriage,
Russian nationality, Russian language.
Russian nationality.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
but Elena, but don't you contradict yourself when you say, you know, this plays no role? I mean, but then this whole excitement about the Constitution plays no role. And to be honest, I mean, look at how Constitutional Court just gave their blessing to these anti-constitutional amendments. And when I look at all this, and I see that, I understand that this is something which is like really appalling, but at the same time, when did Russian constitution in the recent years under Putin actually produced any restraining results?
You see, the real amendments were in the first set of suggestions. So Parliament, government, local self-government, human rights. All other amendments was not really serious. You told about the strange commission without the professional lawyers, with strange persons inside that commission. It was some kind of
so you probably, so the first set was more structural, right?
Yeah,
because you actually changed the structure of the state, and the structure of certain political rights. And the second were more you know, tonal. It was about the style rather than structure. This is what you would propose. This is something, by the way, that in Germany wouldn't work. In Germany and in the European, as you probably know better than me, any word like this, any expression like this has a meaning for interpretation of the Constitution, for interpretation of even usual laws. But you would say that in Russia this doesn't play a role.
I think that they killed Russian Constitution. Now it is the strange document without structure, without ideas, without so-called wholeness. It's a strange document. I think after it we have only the two ways. The first is to adopt new constitution. The second is to return to the constitutional redaction of 1993, and to begin to do something from the past, because the everything we have now in our hands is impossible to read, to understand, to teach.
Yeah. Elena, the second question of Alexis before we go to Juliana V, who sent us a question in writing, but Alexis asked this relevance of the Venice Commission. If the Venice Commission in June makes a statement about that, would this have any impact on the situation?
So it will be the decision of Venice Commission, first of all. We do not know when it will be those strange vote. Now, maybe it will be in May.
You mean the public vote? You mean the public voting about the constitutional amendment
Strange public
in Russia?
vote. Yes, we do not know when it will be. We do not know the situation with coronavirus in Russia. So maybe if it will be in June, so the amendments will not enter into force. But in any case, I think that in any case, somewhere, maybe in the Parliament Assembly of the Council of Europe, our Peter Tolstoy will tell that this is the decision, but everything will have been adopted. This is the history, so let it put this decision somewhere to the library. But for us, it's
Peter Tolstoy. Yeah, I just want to clarify. Peter Tolstoy is the infamous member of the Russian delegation to the Council of Europe, the Parliamentary Assembly. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the questions that were in writing. Juliana V is asking, is there still any backdoor open to change the amendments?
The main thing we have done after the first announcement of amendments, we tried to analyze all the amendments. We prepared the book. We prepared the different conclusions. We even prepared the 75 pages amicus curiae to the Constitutional Court. It was prepared in the situation of blitzkrieg, in the situation of special military operation of the changing of Russian constitution. So we have the vision of all the process. We analyze all the mistakes and all the violations. Maybe this is the platform from which we can begin the changing, but we can do it only with the changing of political regime.
So in 2036, okay.
No, it will be earlier, much earlier. Because
but your answer is basically no.
No.
Your answer to the question, can we still reverse it or change the amendments, is basically not under Putin.
Yes.
Okay. Short and clear. I will go to the next written question. Karsten W asks, and it's directed to you. To understand your statement, Professor Lukyanova, can you kindly give us examples, a couple of examples of the violation of the rights and the contradiction in the Constitution? Maybe one or two examples, because some people are new to the topic, maybe.
Easy example. Так, я сейчас буду путаться с терминами, Сережа. У нас свобода собраний, да?
I will be. We're doing it in a nice, relaxed way. I can translate whatever you say in terms of terms, and no problem.
Первое главное это нарушение свободы собираться мирно и без оружия.
So, for example, the violation of the freedom of assembly, to assemble freely without weapons.
Yes. So we have a lot of cases when persons stay somewhere without with some. Нет, я здесь сейчас к термину буду путаться. Значит, у нас очень много примеров и решений Конституционного суда нарушений этого права, но они продолжают нарушаться. Вот сейчас у нас в тюрьме человек, который незаконно в тюрьме, потому что Конституционный суд уже сказал, что его нельзя сажать в тюрьму, но его из тюрьмы не отпускают.
So, for example, I'm translating what Elena is saying. Basically, in Russia, the freedom of assembly is abolished. Yeah, I would say. There are people who come and demonstrate, and they end up in prison just because they were outside and demonstrating, and one of them is in prison despite the acquittal by the and protest of the Constitutional Court. He is still there, and Elena even wanted to mention his name, and his name was
Konstantin Kotov. His name.
Yeah. Konstantin Kotov. He's an important and well-known, basically political prisoner. But I think, Elena, what the person meant was in terms of the new amendments. Where do the new amendments contradict each other or constitutional rights? That's how I understood the question, as an example.
So the amendments refuse the right to be elected for the persons who have the document, the right to live abroad. This is the answer.
So anyone who lived abroad,
who have the permission to live abroad, all of them cannot be elected, and they cannot. They do not have the access to the public service.
Office.
So they cannot be judges, cannot be deputies, members of the parliament, cannot be governors, cannot be. So,
and this is of course relevant now because many of the people had to leave for political reasons. Many of the people had to leave for political reasons, and it doesn't have to be Khodorkovsky. There are many other names, people who had to escape, and this is basically telling to them you will never be able in the future to run for public office.
Yes,
and that violates their passive rights of being elected.
So as for me, I'm not so I only want to live near the sea, near our northern Baltic Sea. So I like this place. I work in Moscow. I fly every week to teach my students in normal times without the quarantine. I have the permission to live in Latvia, but I cannot be elected. I cannot be a judge. As for me,
even the judge, even you cannot even be judge. Yeah, I didn't realize that it's also for judges. We will continue, Elena, with questions. We have plenty of them. That's why let's do some of them. Carolina asked. She is a Greens advisor from Lithuania, and she's asking, when a decade ago Putin and Medvedev swapped places, the famous charade, Russian people were outraged by such blatant cynicism. They went to streets and in large numbers, but this time the cynicism seems much greater, but nobody seems to be walking on the streets. Are the Russian people just going to swallow it or show some self-esteem? This is a question to you by Karolina S. She's a green advisor from Lithuania. And before we go to the next question, Johanna E. is now online, and she will ask her question herself. Johanna, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, Strasbourg. Yes, and I have one question. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not working in this case with like these things, but yeah. I think, Sergey, you said the Europe Court isn't in a position to take any effect, but I have one question. Does there is any possibility for the International Court to change or to take effect? Maybe not just to change the law, but also yeah, that the society is rising up. I think that this is very important. So maybe yeah, is there any possibility? Is this yeah, would this change
to do
anything?
Something from outside the country, you mean? Yeah, to somehow intervene in this process from outside.
Yeah, because I think we are discussing also about human rights, and so I think we have to make something outside the country.
Okay, thank you so much for your question, Johanna. So.
У меня 4 раза прерывался голос, поэтому первый вопрос я совсем почти не поняла. А второй я правильно поняла, что какое значение все-таки имеет решение международных судов? Имеют ли они значение для Российской Федерации?
Да, каким-то образом можно вообще в этот процесс нам вклиниться, потому что все-таки речь идет о международных правах, о правах человека. I'm just translating and repeating the questions. And the first question by Karolina was, when there was this charade with Putin, Medvedev, Putin, all the Russians were outraged. Many people were outraged. Why not now? Okay.
I think that now the situation is much worse for the Russian power than at the time when they changed the places, Putin, Medvedev, Putin. So I've told that the public confidence to the Russian state is very low now. And if I can know what is to feel, I feel that it is nearly the explosion. But every explosion is different. We cannot repeat the methods of 2011 year. We needn't to go outside. We will do it in another manner. But I think that people now even hate the state. They do not respect the state. They do not believe the state. And the number of such people is much higher than it was 10 years ago. That is why they finished to publish ratings of president a year ago in all the social agencies in Russia. Finished, stopped it, announced that we stopped to publish the ratings.
What about the question of Johanna regarding any option of intervention by international courts on those issues?
I didn't tell that. As for me, I consider the great importance of every decision of international law versus Russia. It's information, it's the influence on Russian political and judicial system, everything. I cannot say, что Россия не исполняет все время решения международных судов. Вот как?
Elena doesn't agree that Russia does not follow at all the rulings of international courts. This is not something that you can confirm. Okay.
Yes. Maybe only common measures when it deals with the legislation. But even in this situation, sometimes Russia changes its laws after the decisions of the international court, especially of the European Court of
but what are the options for European Court of Justice, for example, or European Court of Human Rights, for example, intervening here? It's not even, I mean, is anyone claiming, did anyone sue Russia about those changes of amendments? I don't know about anything.
About the political party. The whole law was changed after the decision of the European Court of Human Rights. The whole after
but this reform, the constitutional reform. Now, this was the question: Can we do? There is nothing going on. No court is dealing with this issue now.
The commission is not the judicial organ. It's the consultative organ, and will be. So let us see what will be in June.
Yeah.
So the steps
great. Let's go to the.
But they are the steps.
Yeah. Let's go. We have plenty of questions. We have only 20 minutes left, a little bit less. I have JPSIFS. I have no idea who this is. Who wants to talk with the last name starting with K? Someone put me is this the right name? JPSI. JPSI.
Yes, but it is a Latin transcription. Actually, it's Joseph. Ms. Lukyanova doesn't hear me. Is it right? I'm coming from Latvia. I'm but if you, and I have to apologize the same like Ms. Lukyanova for my low English. If you haven't objections, may I ask you in Russian?
Yes, please. Yes. Ask in Russian. Just make it very brief, please, because we need to go to the next question. And I will translate it.
Я позволил себе, входя в вебинар, посмотреть ваше CV. Вы серьезный специалист в конституционном праве. Для меня, в общем-то, тоже вот очень странно это обнуление сроков президентских, действительно. Но мы с вами живем в Латвии. И поэтому я, как специалист конституционного права, хотел спросить вас, не считаете ли вы, что современное латвийское законодательство, вновь принимаемые законы, особенно вот это вот знаменитая преамбула Конституции, и, кстати, Сергей, может, это и вам интересно, нацелены конкретно против нелатышского населения Латвии? Ведь вы, Сергей, занимаетесь этническими конфликтами. И если вы так считаете, как крупный специалист, готовы ли вы заняться этими вопросами в Латвии, как в стране вашего, в общем-то, уже долголетнего пребывания?
Great. Спасибо большое. Я понимаю, Иосиф вас зовут. Вы, наверное, там одна буква неправильно была. Я переведу коротко по-английски и потом передам слово Елене. Joseph from Latvia is asking Elena, because she is a constitutional lawyer, not only to talk about the Russian situation, which he shares the concerns, but also about the recent situation in Latvia, for example, where the chapeau of the constitution, the introduction of the constitution was changed with the tendency of discriminating, as Joseph says, against non-Latvian population, whether she wants to make a statement about that. Before we go to that, let me ask one more question, because we don't have much time. And this is a question of someone from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill from the United States, writing a Russian, at least Russian name, Stanislav. And he's asking two questions. How great are the chances of political repression in Russia against public intellectuals who oppose these constitutional changes? This is number one. Or do dissenting experts risk their lives or their freedom? And number two, can constitutional law still be taught in Russia without self-censorship? Have you or your colleagues encountered a refusal to publish critical materials in Russian academic journals? So these are the three questions. Latvia, the freedom of dissenting opinions against the constitutional amendments, and is it still possible to teach constitutional law freely? Someone is trying to call you, Elena, all the time.
About Latvia. So I really take part in all the constitutional processes in Latvia. But I'm the foreigner for Latvia, and so I only try to help the local lawyers to decide some cases, especially in the constitutional law, and I try to help them. I only am to constatize that Latvia has very strict ethno-linguistic conflict. And I think we'll work with Sergey and his commission to understand the situation and to help to solve this crisis. I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. I also take this as a concern with me in my daily work, and Alexei and myself, we're also sometimes in exchange on those issues. So please tell us, so thank you, Joseph. Elena, please tell us what is the situation now with dissenting voices? Was it possible to criticize these amendments? Is it possible for you to still teach constitutional law without self-censorship? Did you have any difficulties publishing?
So I can criticize. I have been
and
doing.
Before, Elena, just briefly, to all of our viewers, we really have to stop at shortly after 8, which is in 10 minutes. So we're stopping accepting questions, and unfortunately, I apologize. We will not be able to finish the question list. There are plenty of questions. We will have to repeat the webinar again, but I just wanted to warn the people. So, Elena, please, about the situation with your freedom.
I suppose the question was made by for the student. His name is Stanislav. I think his surname is Stansky. Yes. So I can criticize. I can write freely. It will be difficult to teach a new constitutional law, but otherwise we have 3 untouchable chapters, and they stayed in the same conditions, and we'll do our best, we'll try to do our best to teach to our students with the European values, with human rights and to understand them, the condition and the situation with the constitutional amendments. The only thing I can do now.
Great. Well, a lot of respect, by the way. Thanks so much for staying strong and fighting. I will just take 3 questions, and this will be the last 3 questions that we will ask. for today. First of all, there is a thank you for your presentation, says Coral M. What is the position of judges in this constitutional crisis in Russia? What is their opinion? And what do you think about the amendment about Russian being the state-forming nation? Do you think it will have practical consequences, or is it mostly symbolic? You basically answered this question. You think it's symbolic, but maybe you can add something. And the last question that we will take for today, Susanna C. is asking, thank you for a very interesting presentation. Why do you think it's so vital for Putin to stay in power after 2024 instead of taking more of a behind-the-scene role, as it was suspected he would before the reset of the zero? And do you think that the megalomaniac tendencies which lead through propaganda to a cult of personality? I don't understand the last question. So basically, the last question is, why does Putin need this? To stay not only in power, but formally as a president in power until he, I don't know what happens to him. Why can't he just go behind the scenes, make him a nice title like Nazarbayev in Kazakhstan, control everything, but not being called the president? So, and with that, we will unfortunately have to close the list of questions. I'm totally sorry about this. Elena.
I also answered to the question of we don't know about what is happening in Putin's head. So we do not have the information. Why does he need such a situation with their reign of term? What about judges? I think nobody knows what things judges, but I think they will be happy if they will be independent, like all other society in Russia. And what was the second part of the question? What about?
It was a question about the. Sorry, I had to turn on the light. The judges, and then the questions were deleted by my dear team. But the question was also regarding the state-forming nation, whether this would have any impact.
Thank you. So I think about the so-called state nation is not important inside the Russian, in internal Russian policy, but sometimes it may be very important for external Russian policy when, for example, we can speak about the defense of Russian citizens abroad. For example, somewhere in Donetsk, Lugansk, Abkhazia. As for me, I can see the only reason for this amendment for the abroad external policy of Russian Federation, not for internal.
One point, and I will take the one last question, because that's actually something that I wanted to ask you for the last final question. Well, we are basically making this is a hearing of the European Parliament, right? This is something that we would otherwise prefer doing in Brussels with you. Well, we're doing it this now digitally. So, and the question is, of course, what can be our role of European countries, of the European Union? What are the instruments and the tools that you think we still have in dealing with this Russian regime, regardless of the constitution?
So first of all, you can show to Russian judges, to Russian courts, how to work. This is the main thing you can show. For Venice Commission is to show how can be made the decisions. What is the real legal culture? What is the real legal the rule of law? You give us the time to prepare our own generation to work together. Good specialists. You give us the time and give us the good example. You give us the notebooks, the books, the decisions with which we can show how to do, how to discuss the questions and the laws in the parliament and other. The main thing you can do. And of course, we need the decisions of European Court of Human Rights on all Russian cases. I can realize that there are a lot of Russian cases. I think we last year we once more the first step. It is bad, but it is good. You help us, to Russian lawyers, to Russian advocates, to Russian judges, to analyze the decision and to understand how to work.
Wow, this was a very inspiring and very motivating last word, because this is something, especially now during the crisis, which we are all, I mean, it's a common crisis and you know it from Latvia. I think this is probably the best that we can do also vis-a-vis our Russian friends and partners, to show how democracy can function and can deliver both, right? We need to show that democracy is not compromised by the current crisis, but also that democracy can deliver and manage the current crisis. And this is very difficult, and you see, we all see how difficult it is to find the right balance. But I think it is important for us, and this is something that we're discussing in Germany and in Europe, to stick to our democratic values even now. And by doing so, this is the best tool against any propaganda against the European Union, that we stay true to ourselves. And listening to the situation today, to the situation in Russia, and listening to you and knowing about your life work that you're doing and your courage, you are inspiring to many of us to continue fighting for democracy, because we know how difficult it is to keep this democracy elsewhere, or to get this democracy in other countries. So thank you so much for fighting, and for your time, and for being with us and sharing this in a different and a difficult language today. You were great, and we learned a lot.
My English became better.
That's great. So we continue.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much to everyone, all the people here who were here. There were a lot of participants. It's fun, and we will return with another topic, another guest, and at some point, hopefully with Elena again. Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye. Все хорошо?